So basketball has this thing they call the Most Improved Player Award. And it's not for rookies or, newer players. It's about someone who's improved from where they were in a previous season. So if at the end of last season you were on the bench and scoring 4 points a game, and this year you're scoring 12 points a game and you're a starter in your team, you're a chance of winning the Most Improved Player Award. And I thought, why don't we do something like that in cricket? So I made it up. So these are my rules/laws, starting with the most obvious, looking at a player who was better than they used to be. And this is for tests only, so poor Shai Hope, who has clocked ODI cricket, doesn't have a chance with his current test average. And before you get started saying Marnus Labuschagne, he can't win because I class him as a rookie. If we had a best test debutant, he'd probably win that, with maybe an honourable mention to Jasprit Bumrah. But I haven't looked at that, so Marnus can hit the showers. I also wanted a decent amount of tests before and after, so Mark Wood missed the cut, for instance, as did Rohit Sharma. I settled on a 2-year season because Test cricket is such a wacky schedule, and 1 year doesn't really give players enough chance to perform home and away. As you'll see, at times here, 2 years doesn't always give players enough chance to perform home and away. And then I looked at the 2 years before as the previous season to see how they were performing at that stage. That means where possible, I won't be focusing on historic records because, well, Ishant Sharma would win that anyway. Mostly I'll be looking at the last 4 years, except for the players who don't have much playing time in that previous 2-year window. And then finally we have to talk about the one player who missed out entirely, Ben Stokes. In the last little while, Stokes has had a massive surge in tests. As Matt Roller says, since late 2018, Stokes took off. But do you know what happened before then? The middle of 2018. And Stokes was poor with the bat then. He really got amazing with the bat later, but his bowling slipped a bit. It means that on numbers alone, he doesn't look like he had a much better 2 years than previously. I think he has improved, but compared to some on this list, you'd have to cherry pick his timings to get him in. And if I do that for him, I have to do that for everyone. And one reason I picked the random 2-year date was to make it fair to all players. Even if Stokes was on this list, he probably still wouldn't win it. No, he definitely wouldn't win it. So in some ways, by covering here, you get a good feel of him being on the list, but he is definitely not on the list. Let me make that very clear. For the list, I went to Twitter, because that is where all the people are now. I had a rough idea of a few cricketers from looking through form, but then I forgot about them, and I just chucked up this list online. On it, I missed a couple I knew for sure, Kemar Roach and Shannon Gabriel. It was quite clear from the many fans out there that I might have also missed Babar Azam, and I'll explain why later, but that was fun. I did an updated list later that had Stuart Broad on it. But after closer inspection, and with some fans getting involved in Twitter, it turned out that Broad had been this good, or at least roughly this good before. Mohammad Shami was another one who was mentioned. But having a look, he's kind of always been this good. It's just that he doesn't always play a lot, and maybe people just think they've seen more of him now. I'm not sure. But he was good before, he's good now. So here are the final nominees. Bubba made the final list, but you'll see a few other names as well. The ones that got the most blowback were Henry Nicholls, Mehidy Hasan, and Umesh Yadav. Oh my guys, I was not ready for the hatred of Umesh Yadav. But I had my list, and for its flaws, I believe it probably has the players who have improved the most, according to my arbitrary season that I made up. So let's have a look at these guys. I didn't think Shan Masood was a test player the first time I saw him. And it's okay for me to be dishonest, as I have told him this. I thought he was selected on his family connections. And even though he made a decent half-century on debut and 100, I struggled to see what the selectors saw in him. He seemed vomitous in the channel outside off stump. And I'm not sure vomitous is a word, but it's how I felt. He was in and out of the team so many times that it was hard to really get a handle just how much of a test player he wasn't. Then he went off and saw a bunch of gurus and one charlatan, and when he came back, he looked so solid that if it was just a case of looking better than you used to be, we'd just give him the award now and go sit on the couch. So he looks like a test player now, but he's not played enough tests. 8 tests, even if they are scattered around a bit, is such a small sample. And while he has 200s in those, they are both at home. I like that 5 of the tests are in South Africa or Australia. But I'd like it more if one of the hundreds was there as well. I think he's playing like someone has done an elaborate experiment and put his face on another person's body. But unlike a bad 90s movie, I really want to see more. Shan, I want to believe. Yes, let me stop you there. Ravi Jadeja has already improved. That doesn't discount you from this list as long as you are also improving further. In Ravi's case, he lost a few runs off his bowling average, but that's cool because he was superhuman before, and his batting was handy before. But kind of haunted by those epic first-class triple hundreds he was always making when he was a fetus. So to make it really clear, his bowling has slipped a bit, but his batting has risen. It's just that his batting has risen a lot. With that, he can change what India can do as a team if he's a genuine number 7 option. And the fact that he averaged 41 away from home just makes that all more likely. There are a few not outs here, but he's also passing 50 a lot now. So it's hard to say he's not a better player than he used to be. Remember when Jason Holder was a bits and pieces test all-rounder? That's about the worst thing you can be. Underperforming with both bat and ball. It's like a hellish all-rounder. He was the 5th bowler and the number 8 batsman. Part-time squared. But he had leadership, and there was clearly something here, perhaps the glue of what was a poor team. Now look at this. He's had a 36-run turnaround in what he is worth to the West Indies. Look right there. His batting has shot up. That's a good bump. And his bowling has gotten even better. And looking at the graph before, his all-round differential was in the negative. The basement, dead and buried. And now it's all up there and smiling. If graphs could smile. Now, before you go giving him the MIP badge or a sash or whatever we decide to give him, there are some things here to consider. He hasn't played many tests, and of those 11, 9 have been at home. And his bowling is super fine, but that's also because of the Dukes and the West Indies pitches that everyone's been bowling like that there. But this is where it gets trickier, because if that's the case, then his batting makes no sense. It shouldn't exist. But when you look just beyond the average, he's made only 3 innings over 50. It's just that some were massive. So he looks like more of a frontline bowler than before, but I'm not quite sure on his batting yet. I don't expect him to keep averaging 14 with the ball or over 40 with the bat, but he certainly looks like a better player than he was before, and by, a considerable distance, by his own height. Yadav is an Asian seamer. They should be given a cuddle and a lie down. But often they're treated like they're wastes of carbon life forms. I would say that so far, Umesh has been a good, ordinary bowler. Maybe compared to the Indian quartet of recent times, he's the Ringo, but there's nothing wrong with being Ringo. Ringo was great, but it's a comparison thing. And because of that, he seems to make fans really angry. Like this from Quora, which seems odd, because even if he was bad at bowling, he should still know of it. But what's he been up to of recent times? Well, let's look at this graph. I mean, that is good. I was told that he only takes wickets against poor teams, but it turns out that other than the fact everyone is worse than India, he also did okay against some teams playing decent cricket. I think his better numbers are down to the fact that he's been used better, picked when the pitches suit him, taken out on days when the more skillful bowlers can do his job. He's probably one of the best squad guys in cricket, along with Chris Wokes, what basketball would call a 6th man, someone who can come on but isn't automatically one of your starters. Of course, we have 11 men on the field in cricket, so the best 12th man might confuse people. Mehidy Hasan hasn't played many tests, 22 over his entire career, so he scrapes into calculations here. It's not a good place to start. His numbers look great, but in truth, he's a real home hero and away struggler. But in this period, he also got better home and away. Some seemed angry that I had suggested he had improved at all, but he's certainly been better these last 2 years. But he was also dropped. But I think that has more to do with his away numbers making his record look worse than it is. His last 4 tests had just 6 wickets, but his previous 4 had 26. I just think he's a bowler who's going to struggle away from home and should be used better. But he has improved. But dude, it's complicated. The fact that Sri Lanka have only had 1 top international test seamer kind of tells you about bowling seam in Sri Lanka. And Lakmal has been living the sucky Asian seamer life for a long time. He's had a career average of 37, and while that does suck, Sri Lanka has been the 2nd worst place to bowl seam in test cricket. But he did average over 50 in his first 18 tests, so he's really not had a great time of it. So isn't it wonderful he's finally doing well? And where he got really good was away, which has always been a problem for him. There were wickets against New Zealand, Australia and South Africa, but I think we have to factor in how long he's been improving for. But that doesn't mean he's not had another jump of recent times. And while some of that is away, it's also partly some creative accounting usage of him at home. In Sri Lanka, he was terrible in the previous 2 years, but how he's been used has changed. And by that I mean, outside of bowling at Gaul, which he likes, he doesn't bowl much. 104 overs in 7 matches. Entire innings without overs, others with just 2. He's certainly better than he was, but 104 overs in 7 matches, that's what you'd expect Paul Collingwood to bowl. Neil Wagner bowls that many in a spell. I'm putting Ishant next because he's like Lakmal, a career of bowling on pitches that hate him with late career gradual improvement. It's just that he's Indian, so more people have an opinion on him. Mostly they just laughed at him. He won a Champions Trophy, and that became a punchline instead of adulation. During his career, he has been slightly above average for a seamer in India, but no one ever looks at these things. With someone like him, I think you can actually be unlucky to be picked. The amount of time he's had to bowl on pitches that are Nagpur for quicks is horrible. But then there's now, where he's averaged 19 in the last 2 years and 20 away from home in that time. But if you look at his record over the last half of his career, he's had huge improvement in a few of those random periods I've looked at. If we were looking at a lifetime achievement for most improved player, he'd be a huge shout. And I wonder now if he isn't trying to take 1 wicket for every joke made at his expense. But occasionally I think back to the young Ishant, the man who had a cricket ball-sized Adam's apple, who could get wickets at bat pad in Pakistan and bowled an incredible spell to Ricky Ponting. All I'll say is this: once there was a dream that was Ishant. Dowrich struggled for a long time in Test cricket. Every time he would be in, I'd think, but he's only young. But he was actually never that young. I mean, he was that young, but mostly he was in his mid-20s and just little. But he has made runs recently, and he has done it at home while no one else has really made that many runs in the West Indies. But Dowrich hasn't played a lot of tests. There have been 5 away tests in that period, and in those he's passed 50 once out of 9 attempts. So, from what we could see, he's upped his average by 14 runs by largely doing well at home where no one else has done well. For the West Indies, I just hope this is the real deal. Even if he averaged mid-30s from here on in, that would be awesome for them. So, let's hope this is a thing and Shane Dowrich is now a thing, and I'll continue to think he's younger than he is. Karunaratne used to be this plodding, faceless guy. I don't think anyone had that much to say about him. He existed, but little more. And then when the entire world stopped making runs, he started making them. The interesting narrative at the time was that he was a new breed of player who turned his game around using an inquisitive mind and off-field work ethic. When you look at his numbers, what you can see is that he was a below-average opener before and is an above-average opener now. So he didn't make runs when it was easy, and he has made them when it was tough. So at this point you're thinking, this is an incredible effort. And it is. It's just that he's been great at home and poor on the road. He's actually made a lot of double-figure scores when he has travelled. So you start to think, well, maybe he is better, but he just hasn't converted when he's been travelling. So it'll be interesting to look at what he can do as part of the Mickey Arthur Nerd Club. Nicholls struggled at the start of his career and then suddenly had 2 huge years. If this was 12 months ago, I wouldn't have the time to do this and Henry Nicholls would have had a fair chance of winning. But it was around then that he also hit a wall. And I must admit, I got a little bit obsessed with this. So I started looking up everything. For seam bowlers, there was no obvious problem. He didn't start flirting outside off stump or missing straight ones. So then I turned to spin, and he seemed to be doing well against spin. But I just couldn't let it go, because maybe while Henry Nicholls may not matter to most people, this might be the only time you've heard his name outside of him actually batting. There's something about this that I couldn't let go. So I went and had a deep look at each kind of bowler until I found it. Off spin. Oh dear. Look at this. It's like the pound after Brexit over here. I now know Henry Nicholls as well as anyone ever has, and I honestly think he's improved as a batsman against almost everything, except off-spin, which is absolutely beyond toxic to him at the moment. Latham is a New Zealand opener, and historically it has been hard to open there. So he's been averaging 38, and that ain't bad. Last 2 years he's averaged 53, so that's really good. Now that does include a 264 not out, which is a stocking stuffer. But here's the thing, he did make that score. To take it off him would be quite odd. It would be RootMaths. So let's take a quick look at RootMaths. A few years ago, Joe Root made 180 at Lords. Before and after, he had struggled a bit. The problem was that 180 runs really ruins your average. So people took it out to make their point. That is when Dave Tickner coined the term RootMaths for creative accounting when it comes to averages. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't say that a player is out of form from any date you choose, or even say that a player has only scored 2 scores over 15 in the last 20 innings. But you can't change that average, as that is not how averages work. If you do that, it's RootMaths. And if you're an Australian giggling right now, I'm sorry, but the term is RootMaths. You're just going to have to come to terms with RootMaths. But for Latham, we don't really have to use RootMaths. We can just look at what he did. He struggled in the UAE in Australia, but he did make 100 in Sri Lanka. Batting was weirdly better in New Zealand during the last 2 years, but while his improvement is perhaps not as dramatic as his average shows, he's now a world-class opener. And I tell you this, there aren't many out there right at the moment. Yes, before you go off, I know, Cummins was really good before, but guess what? He's even better now. And you have to respect that. And he's done it all from first change. That's some real Ginger Rogers work. There aren't many great first change seamers, and Cummins only opened the ball less than 30% of the time in the last 2 years. The other thing that you can notice is his average hasn't changed that much, but that is 18% better. Come on, we have to 18%. That's a proper percent better. Now, at the same time, he's only had 5 tests away from home, and they were in the seamer-friendly UK. The narrative I keep thinking is that he went from good to great, but I think I might need to see more. Soft voice time. First time I saw Kemar Roach bowl, I thought he was a 10-year star. He had pace, decent control, sideways movement, and it all looked so natural and easy and repeatable. Oh, repeatable, don't we love that word? But then the car accident happened, and he wasn't the same afterwards. One thing that clearly changed was where he bowled on the crease, but the other one was he just slowed down a little bit. Let's start with the fact he's been really good. But as you may have noticed from everything I've said so far, bowling in the West Indies has been happy fun times. So he's averaged less than 20, but he's played 1 away test, although that was in Asia. So while he hasn't been tested much outside of home, there is something that makes me think he's more of a different machine now. Before, against left-handers, he was averaging 37. Now, it's 16. Dramatic pause. And it's no fluke. There was a ball he bowled to the left-hander Mark Stoneman in England a few years back that was unplayable. It came from over the wicket, pitched way outside leg, and then snaked around like one of Yondu's arrow things and took out off stump. But the thing is, as great and otherworldly as that ball was, that's a hard delivery to replicate. But around the wicket, he is a constant threat to lefties. He doesn't need a magic ball, just regular movement while coming from wide on the crease. So now he bowls around the wicket 79% of the time to left-handers, and he's the god of thunder from around there. A while back, CricViz put up a thing about Morne Morkel or some other bowler, and there was this weird outlier on their graphs that made no sense. Here are the guys who swing it, up here are the seamers, and all the way down here is Gabriel, who does neither. According to CricViz, he also doesn't get that much extra bounce. And that's why, despite being really fast, he's ended up with a bang-on average type average. For the record, average isn't bad. I know it sounds bad. So the last 2 years, seamers averaged 27. So that means a bowler who averaged 27 is average. But there have been more than 100 seam bowlers, and 33 of them averaged less than 27. So to average 27 is better than average. Now, 33 is close to 30, and almost every time I look at something like this in cricket, it seems to be close to 30%. So if this has been confusing because I keep saying 27, 33 and 30, let me make it really clear. I'd suggest that being average in cricket puts you in the top 30%, and that's really good. So in this case, average ain't average. Back to Gabriel, who was slightly worse than average in the last 2 years. Now he's got better and he's slightly better than average. And as much as I like him, and I really do, really like him, had I taken a big look at him before I did my shortlist, I'm not sure he would have made this list. He was marginally better at home than before, but being that everyone else took wickets there, you'd have expected him to do much better. He was good in Asia, 9 wickets at 32. Anyway, I just think it's great that he does all this without extra bounce or sideways movement, just by being fast. I'm just not convinced that he's improved that much. He's just played at home more. Chances are, you can remember Babar being good at ODIs a couple of years back. But unless you're a Pakistani fan, you maybe hadn't noticed that he wasn't really doing very good at tests. In fact, wasn't doing very good is unfair. The reason he missed out on my original list was because I'd set up a 500 run minimum. And in 11 tests, he didn't make 500 runs. This is a fun fact. He averaged 10 in the second innings of tests in that period. That's actually hard to average that low, especially if you can hold a bat like him. Like, I'd believe in 15, but 10, I don't know. It's like he was trolling everyone. He was an incredibly sexy basket case. Now, I know what you will say. It was inevitable that he would be good just because, look at him. He was always going to be good. Look at him. Look at him. Now, I want to James Vince this argument. Not all pretty batsmen make it. Also, I don't remember there being this huge narrative that Babar was about to skip into the Fab Four's limelight. And he made this incredible turnaround in an era where bowlers have dominated. He put over 40 runs on his average. And he was good away too. His worst away series was in South Africa and he averaged 37. That's still 13 better than he was anywhere in his previous period. It wasn't inevitable. It was remarkable. That's it with our runners and riders. So who is the most improved test player of the last 2 years? I have narrowed it down to 3 names. So here they are. All of these 3 have a good claim to this. What Jason Holder has done is barely believable. You can talk about the home games all you want. He became a weapon, and who had him down as even a potential BB gun before this? Maybe you'd say he could hit, but that was about it. But his bowling? Come on. Unless you were permanently on angel dust, no one saw this coming. And Ishant Sharma. Come on. After all of this, for him to pull himself up from punchline to reliable and then take another step up, what an effort. And while I don't want to focus too much on what happened before my previous 2-year period, it is Ishant, and me and him have history. His career started when I began doing this job. We're locked together eternally, it's a spiritual thing. You wouldn't understand. But when it comes down to it, Babar Azam just did things that, he did big crazy things, he did lots of things, and I tried to poke holes in it. He averages 200 in Pakistan, so I thought maybe if you take that... No! You can't even RootMaths him away. He was just that much better than he used to be. Babar Azam went from terrible to great. No one else took that big a jump without some extra questions. I think every player on this list is a winner, but I think Babar Azam is the most improved player in Test cricket.